Hi, this is Brian Mayer. Welcome to another episode of Paladin. Today we're going to talk about reading people's minds, which some people think is a skill that I get paid to do. I've been counseling people for about 35 years, and in some social settings where people don't know what I do, and they ask me, what do you do for a living, or what do you do? And I say, I'm a counselor. Usually the first thing out of their mouth is, so are you analyzing me right now, or can you read my mind, or some such thing like that. And early on, when I would get this question, I would try to explain to them, that counseling is not reading people's minds. There's something else going on here. There's actually some skills that I learned how to do in school and things like that. And usually by that time, they've gone on to shake hands with somebody else. So I've started just changing my answer and saying things like, yes, I can read your mind, and I'm doing it right now. Well, that's why I don't get invited to a lot of parties. But anyway, so I want to look at a book today called Mindwise. It says Why We Misunderstand What Others Think, Believe, Want, and Feel by Nicholas Epley, published in 2015, so almost a decade ago. But when I see a title like this, I think, well, that's what I get paid to do, is understanding people. And so what does Epley have to say about this? And so he looks at how well we can enter into the world of someone else. And he calls that a sixth sense, which basically just means how well can you understand other people? How well can you get into their experience, or something like that. And he talks about how he makes a couple of claims that we, as evolved animals, of course, we interpret other people. We are mind reading all the time. Every time you have a conversation with anybody about anything, you are constantly trying to read their mind, or at least try to predict their behavior or what they're going to say. You're paying attention to the other person, and we read each other much more than we think we do. So that's his first claim, that we read minds almost all the time. It's not just people like pastors and counselors who do that. And second, when we read each other's minds, he said, more often than we think, we are correct in our assessments. More often than not, we accurately read what's going on in somebody else. Somebody acts sad, and we accurately interpret they're sad, So we are more accurate than we think we are. We might think that we don't interpret anybody ever accurately, but most of the time we predict other people's behavior with a pretty decent sense of accuracy. And we're pretty good at reading what's going on inside of them. But it's the third assumption that he makes a lot of work on. He talks about how that we still make mistakes. We're not perfect in our interpretations of other people. When we read other people, we do miss them quite a bit. And we miss them oftentimes on whoppers. We miss them on huge issues where the emotions are involved and things like that. And the more we miss them on important issues, that's where the relational breakdowns can happen. And so he says that, number one, we read people more than we think we do. Number two, we're more accurate than we think we are. But number three, we also make a lot of mistakes, and those mistakes are huge. And those are usually the mistakes that cause for problems in the relationship. And his solution is that as we slow down and think about other people and pay attention a little bit more in conversations, that we can read people a little bit more. But he also talks about some things that get in the way. Maybe our natural mind reading ability is hindered somehow by some things. And the first thing he says that hinders our natural mind reading ability is our self-centeredness. Because when we have a conversation with somebody, we are pretty much focused on what we want to say, the views that we want to contribute, that we want to say to this in this conversation. And we're not so much paying much attention to what the other person is saying. And to the degree that we are more focused on ourselves, we're going to have a hard time entering into their world. We're so preoccupied with ourselves. I heard a joke a long time ago that when you're in your 20s and 30s, you are always preoccupied with what other people think of you. And when you get to be in your 40s and 50s, you no longer care, or you care a little bit less what people think of you. And then when you get to be in your 60s and you become mature, you realize people were hardly thinking about you at all, which can be freeing but also demoralizing to some degree. And that's probably true, that in most conversations we think other people are focused on us when they're probably focused on themselves, just like we are. So self-centeredness is one of the things that gets in the way of our ability to read people. Another one is stereotypes. And again, this is a mixed bag here, because he would say some stereotypes, the reason why stereotypes exist is because there is some validity to them. The popular one that he mentions is the differences between men and women. You know, supposedly there's a big book written a few years ago, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. It's as if men are from other planets than women, and, you know, can't speak the same language, and, you know, one of them is Romulan and Klingon if you're a Star Trek fan. But he said that's making a big deal out of things, when really, he said it would be more accurate to say something like men are from Illinois and women are from Iowa. Because there are differences between Illinois and Iowa. I went to school and I spent 10 years in Illinois. So there are differences between Illinois and Iowa, but they're not that great compared to the differences between Mars and Venus. And so if you have a list of stereotypes in your head, you know, this particular population always does this, or these people always do that, that can get in the way of you understanding what any one of those particular people are doing. And then the last one is the incomplete context. And what he means here is that we oftentimes judge people exclusively on their behavior. We look at what we see on the outside, and we presume that because we understand, or because we have accurately assessed what's going on the outside, that therefore we know what's going on in the inside. One of the biggest mistakes he makes is the one about homelessness, when he talks about, you know, someone's homeless, but we don't know why. So it's possible for them to have an undesirable behavior on the outside, but actually have some kind of purer motive than we might assess to them on the inside. Likewise, someone could be doing something what looks really good on the outside, but inside they're doing it for the wrong motive. Jesus criticized the Pharisees for this all the time. They would fast for the wrong reasons. They would, when they would give money, they would blow a trumpet. These days we would call that virtue signaling. And so you misunderstand somebody when you look at their external positive behavior and assume that that is 100% reflective of what's going on the inside. So those are some of the mistakes that he claims that we make. And I think he's probably onto something here. I agree with him that as Christians, both created in the image of God, not only do we have relationship with God because he created us, but we have relationships with other image bearers, and we have a lot in common with them, because every human being that I meet is created in the image of God. And so no wonder I can read them to some degree, because we're both very, very similar. And when we understand basic things about human nature, sadly, one of those things is sin. We understand the sinful nature. We can oftentimes predict someone's sinful behavior. But I also think that he's on the right track when he talks about how we miss people. And this is what, you know, counseling skills class is all about, is learning how to miss people less, how to be able to enter into their world and understand them. I got a little tripped up when he was talking about interpreting the external behavior and coming to conclusions about the internal. Because it seems like in Scripture, in Matthew, the Bible says, by their fruits you will know them. And most commentators think that those fruits are external behaviors. And so we look at someone's external behavior and we think that that's an accurate reflection of what's going on inside of their heart. And yet, in the same book of Matthew, Jesus scolds the Pharisees for living life on the outside, virtue signaling and all of that kind of thing. And he says on the inside, you're dead man's bones, or you're a whitewashed tomb, or something equally flattering. And he kind of criticizes what's going on the inside. So I want to say, well, what's up with that? Is to what degree is someone's external behavior indicative of what's going on inside of them? And I think we have to be careful. And the bottom line is, we will never be able to totally enter into somebody else's world. We'll never be able to totally understand someone else. And even as a counselor, when I try really hard, I can understand them enough that we can have a connection and that we can make some progress together on whatever's troubling them. But I'm never going to totally enter into their world. And that can be discouraging when you first conclude that. But then you realize there is someone who does know our inner world. And if you read Psalm 139, it talks about how even our thoughts that are far off, before we even know that we're going to think a particular thought, God knows those thoughts. And so he does know our internal world better than we know our own internal world. And so I think we can take some comfort that while other human beings, no matter how hard they try and no matter how much they love us and care about us, are never going to be able to enter into our internal worlds totally, God can do that because he created us. And we also ask at the end of Psalm 139, if there be any wicked way in me, show me what that is. And we would never invite someone to show us our wicked ways unless they could see them, and we have difficulty seeing them. So not only do we have difficulty interpreting each other, but we also sometimes have difficulty interpreting ourselves. But from a Christian perspective, there is encouragement in that the God that we love and serve not only understands the person that I'm trying to help in a counseling setting, but he also understands me. And so there is someone who does understand us. But can I read minds? I'm getting better at it. Invite me to a party and see. Okay, anyway, that's it for today. We'll look forward to the next episode.